This lecture is meant to give you a little bit of background about personality before you post your responses for this week. So the point is, knowing your personality type can help you with career planning at pretty much any stage of your life. From the first choices of different interests and subjects and majors in college, to choosing your actual first job or career path after you graduate, or to advancing within your industry or your organization, or even changing careers later in life. People often find difficulty defining what kind of work they want to do or why a given field makes them comfortable or uncomfortable. And I think you all may know that. Sometimes you've had jobs where you just don't feel like it's a good fit and you can't really pinpoint why. So, for example, personality type is a really practical tool for investigating what works for you, then looking for and recognizing work that satisfies your preferences. So knowing your personality type may, for example, prove helpful in deciding what areas of a certain field that you may be interested in. So like law, medicine, education, or type of business industry a person prefers. Your results from personality assessments can help you become more aware of your preferences. So what I mean by preferences is a preference is essentially what you like. You may, for example, prefer chocolate ice cream over vanilla, or just in general, chocolate over vanilla or vanilla over chocolate. You may prefer reading over watching movies. This doesn't mean, though, that you won't sometimes choose or be pressured to choose a different ice cream flavor or a different kind of activity. But in general, your natural preference would be to choose possibly chocolate, if that is your preference, or reading. Again, all situational, but the idea of preference comes from what comes most naturally to you first. So you may like chocolate and vanilla, but you may gravitate towards chocolate-flavored something first, if that makes sense. And there's no right or wrong answers to preferences. In other words, reading isn't better than watching movies. Each has its strengths and I'm sure its issues. Most people have the ability to do both, which is what I want to emphasize. We are all well-rounded humans. We are going to like a little bit of everything, or have interest in a little bit of everything. The basis of preferences would be, I guess, what comes most naturally to you initially, what's most comfortable. Personality preferences, also called psychological preferences or psychological type, is kind of what you prefer when you're using your mind or focusing your attention. So that's the basis of personality type. Studies and experience have shown that there are consistent patterns for each person. So for example, one pair of preferences is about whether you choose to spend more time in the outside world or more time in the inner world. We call this preference extroversion or introversion. Neither is wrong. You can do both. Sometimes there's that misnomer that extroverts are party people and introverts are weird and antisocial, and that's not the case at all. You just prefer one. And it just, again, might be situational. A person with a preference for introversion might find he or she is happier doing research, if we were to relate it to career, versus a person who prefers extroversion might prefer a field with more interaction with people. They're going to be energized just by that social atmosphere, versus someone who feels like they'll be completely burnt out after an entire day of being around people or socializing or talking or presenting. There are many benefits to understanding your own personality preferences, including how it affects you, how it affects your style of communication, which is so huge, and how they're different from what other people prefer. Preferences really allow us to have different interests, different ways of behaving, and different ways of seeing the world, and we're all unique. While preferences are equal, each has different strengths and different challenges. Knowing these personality strengths and challenges for yourself and others can help you understand, as well as appreciate how everyone contributes to a situation, a task, or a solution to a problem. And I know you guys have all seen this. So, for example, if you have a family, I'm sure you'll notice that everyone approaches a problem or a stressful situation completely differently. It doesn't mean that you don't care about each other or you're, pressing each other's buttons. It's just that everyone has a different approach. And you could appreciate that once you understand personality. Same thing with people in your workplace. Same thing when approaching a relationship. Work environments also influence how comfortable you are at your job. So someone with a preference for introversion, for example, who is required to do a ton of detail work or think through a problem might find it disruptive to be in an environment that's really loud, where there's a lot of interaction required. So when you know or have this awareness of what your preferences are, you can then make arrangements to do your work in a more suitable location. So this is more beneficial for if you're a student or at a time when there's less activity or interference. Even when circumstances make it necessary for you to do your work that you've not chosen, or which you must do as part of your overall job description, knowledge and understanding of type can help you really discover and use your strengths to accomplish the work. When you find an unsatisfactory job fit, you could then examine the reasons and seek solutions based on your personality preference. When you actually have the opportunity to take a new path in your work, type can actually help you analyze the fit of your type with your past work and consider what new direction you can best fit with your preferences. So a little bit about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is what you're seeing right here in front of you. So the Myers-Briggs is an actual formal instrument, so I kind of want to break down a little bit of the framework and some theory behind it. So the MBTI is a formal, probably the most common formal personality assessment out there. You could take it at Citrus College, but I believe it costs $16 as part of the Career Center. So I just kind of want to talk about it just kind of from a global, broad perspective, and I'm going to have you guys as part of this class take some free online assessments. But if you're interested in the actual MBTI, you can always go to the Career Center and take it. So the MBTI is the most widely used personality assessment in the world. Just to clarify, it doesn't measure skills, intelligence, technical expertise, and it definitely cannot tell you what you can and cannot do. It is absolutely not a placement test. The theory of psychological type was introduced in the 1920s by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. His theory basically maintains that differences between people aren't random. Instead, they form patterns or types. Jung believed that nature and nurture both together play a role in the development of personality in adults. So in other words, it's a combo of inborn tendencies, so your inherited characteristics, as well as influences from family, environment, social situations, and like your culture. So both together combined. The actual MBTI tool was developed in the 1940s by Isabel Myers and her daughter. And this was done in the 40s and 50s. So this research is ongoing, providing users with updated and new information about psychological type and its actual applications. So Jung did the theory, and Isabel Myers and Catherine Cook Briggs did the application of it. So a quick exercise in terms of personality preferences, just so you can understand the concept. So think about what your preferred hand is to write with. So think about if it's your left or your right. Go ahead and sign your name on a piece of paper the way you always do, whether it's with your left or your right. Let's assume you did it. It should be effortless. If you're right-handed and you use your right hand to just sign your name, it should feel like absolutely no work at all. However, if you were to switch to your non-preferred hand and put the pen in your other hand and then sign your name with, say, your less dominant hand, I know you could do it. I know it's possibly legible, but it's not going to feel extremely natural. You might have to take extra energy to sign that name. You're going to focus and concentrate more. That's the basis of preference, because imagine if you were in a job your entire life where it felt like you were writing with your non-dominant hand. Slowly over time, it's going to eat away and eat away and eat away. It may, however, become natural over time. So if you practiced writing with your non-dominant hand for years, you might wake up one day and say, you know what, I can write just as good with my left and my right. However, that non-dominant hand will never ever be the most natural. And that's kind of the basis of trying to find work. You want to be able to ideally find a job that's a good fit, a good natural fit. So that way later on in life, you're not extremely de-energized or frustrated or stressed going to that particular job. I also wanted to give you a quick analogy about personality preferences, or the 16-room house analogy. So you will see this after you take your online assessment. So there's actually 16 different personality types that you can see here. And I like to kind of explain it in terms of a 16-room house. So imagine you lived in this huge, beautiful mansion with 16 different rooms. You'll probably use all 16 rooms, just like how you're going to identify with all 16 different types. you'll read the descriptions for all of them and probably realize that there's something about each and every type that you identify with, you relate with, that rings true to you. And just like a 16-room house, you're probably going to have a favorite room, and that's going to be your best fit type. So just say, I'll use my example. I'm an INTJ. This could be like the kitchen. I love to cook. I love to eat. So that's the room that might, be the most enjoyable for me, for example, and I might go in there all the time. But it's not to say that I won't go into the bedroom or the bathroom or the library or the gym or the patio. So there's all these different rooms in a house that you're going to identify with. So in other words, INTP sounds somewhat similar to an INTJ, except for very specific things different about the preference for judging versus perceiving. But I might identify with each and every single one of these types in some way. So just imagine living in this particular house. At some point, you're going to go through all of the rooms. You might only use 5 or 6 rooms that particular day. Another day, you might feel in a different mood and decide that you want to go into this guest room, for example. So that's kind of the analogy for personality. So back to this. I wanted to give you another quick overview, too, of just a little bit about the MBTI online site, which I really, really like. It goes over, again, the 4 different dichotomies. So you'll see this very soon. So it's extroversion and introversion. That's the first 2 letters of type. It's focusing more on directing and receiving energy. Then the second letter of that 4-letter personality type is the way that you take in information, which is sensing, which is the S, or intuition. So the I is for introversion, the N is for intuition, just because so it's not I and I. It's less confusing. The third area would be thinking versus feeling, and that's the way we make decisions. So once we take in all this information, how do we make decisions? And finally is the judging versus perceiving, approaching the outside world. I like to view it as how other people may see you. So it doesn't mean that you're judgmental. It doesn't mean that you're perceptive. It's just the words that Jung used. And personality type matters. I love this section because it breaks down how relevant the personality type or personality theory is in everyday life. It could be applied to so many different facets in one's life. For example, it could have something to do with your type in learning, your type in personal growth, your type in relationships, your type in career. So I feel like it's really fascinating in the sense that it could be applied to the real world in so many different ways. I also want to have you guys take a look at these personality type heads. So I'm going to click here to INTJ really quickly. And there's one for each one of the 16 different types. But I love the little type heads in terms of a snapshot of just looking at, say, INTJs at their best. They're insightful and independent and decisive. It's a really quick snapshot. In other words, if you look at for your personality type, if all of this rings true to you, it might be a good fit. And another way that we look at type is called something that's called in the grip. So if you're under a lot of stress, for example, personality type can reveal perhaps what we do in challenging situations. So if you're in the grip, an INTJ, this particular type as an example, may tend to procrastinate or micromanage or be indecisive or have some short-sightedness or lack initiative, and that's going into an extreme feeling just because they're under stress. And you could see how personality type breaks down at work, and then common jobs that appeal to INTJs. I just want to address common careers. So I'm an INTJ. So for example, I probably could have done really well thriving in a science, technology, engineering, or math field. Like you'll see things like nuclear engineer or scientist. Obviously, I'm not doing that. I am a counselor, which is the opposite end of the spectrum for the helping professions. It just may mean for you, you do not necessarily have to do a job that matches your personality type. What I think it reveals is that you might find that you bring something unique to the table, that you, for example, for me, I do counseling very differently than I think a lot of my colleagues in the department. I'm the only INTJ. So my approach to working with students, my personal style, tends to be different. And as for you,